Well, there it is. And here we are for a slightly delayed episode of Dualistic Unity Raw. I went camping this weekend with my daughter's violin group. This was the first year that she has been a part of this group, and it was very exciting. It was kind of like an icebreaker for them. But little did they know that the timing in my life is just epic in that I love nature. So the sound of the forest. I love the ocean and the sound of the waves. And my favorite instrument is the violin and has been since I was before I can remember being me. I've always enjoyed that sound. And so here I am listening to three of my favorite sounds, and one of them is being created by my daughter. It was an absolutely magical experience for me. There was a point where I had decided I was going to go take a nap in my tent, and all of the other people in this violin group were supposed to be practicing, but I didn't realize that they decided to move their practice area to directly beside my tent. And so I'm lying on my air mattress, my new air mattress, by the way, which was far more comfortable than my old air mattress. So there's another plus. And I'm listening to this incredible piece of music. Actually, Andrew, I sent you a clip of what they were playing, some of what they were playing, and it just went on and on for about an hour and a half. So I had very much a private performance. It very much sounded like I was in the middle of all of them playing. It was just an incredible moment, and it was just not something I would have ever dreamed of asking for, and yet perfect, absolutely perfect. So yeah, I just came back from that experience, and I'm feeling just a tremendous sense of appropriateness in everything that we're doing. Like talking to people over the weekend, especially people who are working so hard to master a form of expression, because it's really all instruments are, whether it's an instrument or it's your voice, it's a form of expression. But that's what this conversation is as well, because you'll notice that people have different kinds of conversation. Some people gossip, some people dwell on very applicable things like what they can do with their car, how they're renovating their house, things like that. But there's also a kind of discussion that applies to everyone. And I really noticed how that conversation plays into the lives of others this weekend, quote unquote, others, in that every single person that I ended up beside at any given point, I was just talking to them about life, but I was doing so under the guise of talking about children or the teenagers that are in this group. Bringing up, like one person was like, yeah, my daughter was a little nervous coming here. I'm like, well, of course, right? Like they start building it up in their head. They start making it out to seem like everybody else never made a mistake before getting here. And they're like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. And what's so funny is that they think we're talking about our kids, but we're really talking about us. We're really talking about the things that we do, knowing that this is a universal thing. Doubt, fear, the ability to identify with how you're doing and try and judge your progress. And it's so interesting to watch children going through it, adults thinking that they're not going through it, and still very much wanting to have that conversation and being so surprised when the conversation comes up, when all of a sudden it's just like, what? We can just talk about things that we go through, but we can do so in a safe way where we're talking about our children, or we're talking about other people, or we're talking about learning an instrument, or we're talking about it in a way that doesn't make it seem like I'm targeting myself. So it's a little easier to take, and it's very relaxing for people. And I just had an incredible weekend of just being me, wandering around. And the best part, I thought, because as I've told you before, I had a friend who actually called me the first genuine misanthrope they had ever met. A misanthrope being somebody who just genuinely doesn't like other people. So that gives you an idea of how I come across, or at least how I used to come across. Because I used to feel awkward, every once in a while. If I wasn't like running the party, it was an awkward experience. Who do I talk to? What do I do? Which direction do I go? Am I supposed to help somebody? What the hell? And so every time I would end up in a situation, very much like at a retreat, one of our retreats, where I'm like, what should I do? I just wouldn't ask the question. I'm like, stop. Pick a direction, go. And that's it. Why am I asking the question? What am I supposed to do? I am literally the act of doing. This is what I'm supposed to do. Are you asking what you're supposed to do in 5 minutes, a minute from now, 2 minutes from now? Focus on what you're doing right now. What are you doing? Are you dwelling in paralysis on what the right thing to do is? Because as soon as you ask, what's the right thing to do? immediately your brain's just like, oh my God, there are so many options. And you end up in this space where you're just like, I don't know. And then you try to compare what the right thing to do is. Don't even ask. Just jump in. Do. You'll be surprised where it takes you.
A fucking men. There is no supposed to do. Right? Like, it's so interesting how in any situation that shit can come up. Like anywhere, any place, anytime. Like, oh, should I be doing something different than what I'm doing? And it's just the question. It's just the consideration about yourself. It's like there's an ability to not think about yourself and just interact, and it's so fucking insanely freeing and peaceful, like not thinking about yourself, just not thinking quite so much. And so I'm glad you're able to have that just beautiful experience. And it's funny, even when you were in the tent, that like, because straight up, there's going to be people out there who, if they're in a situation like that, no matter how beautiful the music is, they're like, I want to take a nap. They're so dead set on that shit that they're like, they better not. Oh, I hope they don't play. Oh my God, they're playing during my nap time. And because they've already fucking decided that it's nap time for me, it's like, it could be nap time in a little bit. Also, you can wait a little longer for nap time. There's nothing like, yeah, it's so funny because I do this. Like, I'll come up with, all right, I want to do this thing now. And then instead of remembering that I was the one who decided I wanted to do this thing at this time and just shifting things around a little bit. It's like I become dead set on this, and I know I recognize it with other people too, or I've talked to other people about this, how I'm dead set, like for example, for that, like, I'm taking a nap right now, and then they start playing. It's like, God damn it, they shouldn't be playing right now. They said they weren't going to be doing it. This was scheduled time. And how you can just, instead of shifting and being like, oh wow, this is beautiful, or seeing it for what it is, letting go of your decision and set fucking mindset that this is what you're going to do, and just roll with things. Like that ability to roll with things and not be dead set necessarily on anything just allows for so much more fluidity and freedom in your life. And so it's incredible how, to your point, how similar our experiences are, and we almost don't want to admit it. Like we're all kind of going through similar types of things, and I've even noticed it more so, and in times when I'm not fucking caught up in my own bullshit, focused on that, being incredibly self-absorbed, I notice more of that shared experience almost. And like kind of actually relatively related, just in interacting with people and kind of being able to be free in myself. I went out with some friends last night, and I've been mostly like, I don't drink nearly as much anymore, and I'm way more sensitive to it. And it's so funny how I used to, like, going out, you got to have at least a buzz going to the pregame, or going to the bar, like be a little tipsy at that point. Now there's not even a thought of that. Like if I have a couple sips of beer or whatever, or even just like going to a bar sober, it's like there's not as much of a difference. And I'm starting to see that, oh, I don't need an excuse like that. I can just fucking let go and be myself and like dance around and have a good time without that crutch. And even to the point where I'll smoke before and just make myself extra sensitive and uncomfortable. And last night I took not a big one, just 5 milligram gummy, one of the batch gummies. Shout out Batch and Dennis Mistriati. Great being high, our last being high guest, great dude. But anyway, I took one of those last night and my friends took them too, and we were just like having a good time, and went to a bar and like danced around and talked with people. And I was talking to uh a girl who was like a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say like make any assumptions or anything, but like a little rigid maybe. And so I started like dancing around as we were talking, and she was like, oh, you really like dancing, huh? Like you're pretty good. Which immediately I was like, that's so weird that someone thinks I'm decent at dancing, because I always told myself I wasn't. And I was like, yeah, I mean, why not? And she obviously didn't have a response to that, because you're at a bar and there's music playing, and there isn't necessarily a great reason not to. It's not to say that you should dance if there's music playing. There's no thing that you have to do necessarily. But I noticed that not I didn't even urge her, because sometimes people are like, "Oh, why don't you dance?" Or the fucked up shit when someone tells, especially for women, like, "Why don't you smile more?" Or "Why don't you be a little happier?" Like, that shit's so fucking whack that people say that to people, but there was nothing for me where I was, like, wishing she danced or anything, but the more I danced and was willing to let go, there was almost like it's not that she had to follow, but I think it shifted from her feeling more comfortable not doing it to her feeling less comfortable not doing it, to where she was willing to get into it a little more, along with some of my friends a little bit more. And it's just I'm starting to see more when I'm not so caught up in my own shit, how much of a gravity there is to, like, just being willing to be yourself, or being willing to be free without an intention for anyone else to do anything. But it almost like it can shift a sort of energy in a sense when you're willing to let go and kind of break that. I don't know if it's like a barrier or a wall or whatever, where it's like, I'm gonna fucking let go right now. I have no regard for whatever. And because you can almost there's like a sense of, you can feel a discomfort for a bit, maybe in yourself, maybe in someone else, maybe there is no difference whatsoever. But as you're willing to do it and just be it, not with any intention, like, things start to shift. And I'm starting to, like, see that more often, and it's cool. And it's not that that's why I'm doing it at all, because, like, I don't give a fuck if anything shifts at all, because, like, I'm doing it. Like, what else could I want to happen? There's nothing else that I would want to happen. So anyway, it's been kind of cool to play with that a little bit more, and just when I'm not so fucking focused on my own shit, realizing that I'm the only one who thinks about me the way I think about me. So it's like, I'm kind of sitting here alone with my thumb up my ass, like, yeah, I am the only one thinking about me right now. So in that, it's like, oh, so if I'm not, then no one is, and I don't have to do that, and I can just fucking live my life and be free in myself. And holy Jesus Christ, that's nice. It's not bad at all.
It's delightfully freeing, heaven-like, in fact. So weird. Like, it's fun because again, 20 years, and I came from a very dark, complicated, tangled place. And by that I mean I was just dark and complicated and tangled in whatever I thought I was and the universe was, and so on and so forth. And every step of the way, it's just like, right, just want to be in control. Like I said, early on for me, it was, what need am I satisfying by thinking about this? That one was tricky, right? Because there's a lot of thoughts that are just trying to satisfy a need, but it's a fictitious need. Do I need to feel more secure? Do I need to feel more valuable? Do I need to feel like I know what's going to happen next? Do I need to feel like I know what that person thinks of me? Do I need to feel like that person likes me? Like, all of this stuff. It's like, oh God, where are all these needs coming from? And so to me, that was a big part of the process. But picking through each and every one of them, and I had a lot. Remember, I was suicidal. Like, I was in a dark, dark place. Like, there was a lot of thoughts, and the only reason I was there is because I could not escape my own gravity. I could not escape the mass of shit that I had built about this fictitious ray. And that's exactly what it was like. It just pulled you in. And so I had to question each and every string that was tying me down, each and every one at a time, until I started realizing you don't actually have to do that. You see, when you're in the darkness, you only feel like, I can just deal with this little thing. I can't deal with the whole thing. It's too big. I'm too small. And you don't recognize that that is, in fact, the real threat. What you think of yourself as a whole, that you think you're too small. You don't have to deal with all the individual threats. That's just you convincing yourself that you're strong enough to deal with the bigger threats. Right? And so that's all it's been over 20 years, is just little threads, medium threads, bigger threads. Oh shit, back to medium threads, right? And it's just, and only because there's that question of, can I really just let go? Can I really just be me? And that's it. Not judge it, not worry about it, not stress about it. Recognize that's really all I've been doing this whole time, regardless of the story I'm telling myself. Can I really just let go? And then you do, little bit by little bit by little bit, and suddenly, again, I have had so many top 10 moments in my life over the last 3 months alone, regardless of other shitstorms in my life. I find myself in a state of mind where it's not what's happening, it's my ability to align with it, to appreciate it, to hear it. As you said, somebody else in that situation listening to that gorgeous, gorgeous sound in the forest would have been like, this isn't what I wanted. I find that hilarious because that really is that's the mastery. Just taking what's happening and doing something with it. Not complaining about it, not thinking it should be different, not feeling like you need to be in control. Just being. It really is a skill, and it really does have a gravity. It has a magic, as you know. Because what's the one thing that everybody who comes to our retreats inevitably says? I don't know if that was grammatically correct or not, doesn't matter. Point is, they say, I didn't know you could feel like that in the world. That's something that people often say. I didn't know you could just feel like that. Well, what's the difference? The fact that we're just providing a space where we're not uptight. We're not on defense. We're not trying to be anything. We have no walls. We have no, like, we're totally willing to be vulnerable. Somebody's like, oh, I want to talk to you about something. You're like, yeah, okay. I can relate to that. Look at this deep, dark part of my life that normally people wouldn't share with you. And they're just like, what the fuck? And that's what all it is that there's no walls. Because why should there be? And that has more power than telling people you should let down your walls. Why would you be telling people that if not for your own? Relax, let go, let its own magic happen.
Well said. It's all you can do, and I'm starting to realize that more and more. And with the question of can you just let go? It's like there's less and less telling you that you can't, almost, as you quote unquote work through. But even like there's points where I say work through stuff, and it's like, what am I exactly working through? And it always just comes back to me here now. Like there's not a big fucking thing until I start thinking about a big fucking thing. Otherwise, it's just me here now. Like, this is it. And I know we say that all the time, but it's like, yeah, this is the whole thing. Like, this is the entirety of it. Is this. What do you want to do with it? Are you really gonna spend it mulling over some other shit from some other thing? It's like, this is the whole fucking all of it is here now. Like, with the narratives, the stories, the all of the weight, and the oh god, it's honestly kind of trippy as fuck to be going through certain things. 'Cause I've talked about this in the past. Like every morning when I wake up, it's just like it's almost like the hood of the car throughout the day is closed, but, like, in the at night, like, it opens up, and then in the morning, it's, like, still cracked open a little bit, so I wake up, and I'm just like, oh, just, like, fucking seeing all this shit going on, and the ability to, no matter how much of a timeline all of that shit has, like, right there, realize, "Oh, this is all just me here now focusing on this thing that I'm not sure of, and I don't have to think about, and actually thinking about it doesn't do me any good. Like sitting here constantly focusing on what could be, what might happen, what this, that, blah, 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 blah. Like there is no reasonable benefit or even thing that I could settle upon that says there is a benefit to doing that. And it's interesting because it's like, I feel like I've just realized that there's no adequate benefit to thought until you wanna use it, like the master servant sort of thing. It's like, it's dope when you can jump in and be like, "Hmm, let's think about, this planning something," whatever. It's like, "Oh, let's do that." And then it's like, set it down, and it's like, "Okay." Because it's almost like I'll sit there planning something, thinking about something, and then I'll realize like, "Oh, that's taken away from this." And so I'm more sensitive to how long I spend doing that. And I'm not saying by any means that I don't get caught up in shit all the fucking time, but there's a sensitivity to it where it's like, oh yeah, there's not this perceived benefit I thought there was for a while. Like it isn't so. it's not so in the same way. And it's so strange that it's only been recently that I've been walking around without thinking, and I thought that I was walking around without thinking as much before, but it's like every time it's it's new, and there's like and it's not that I guess it's like feels like a longer span of time where I'm not, which just fucking extends time a lot when you're actually attentive to what's happening, not caught up in all of the bullshit. So it's like going through shit is almost, I don't know, seems to me like chipping away at the bullshit. So there isn't so much deep shit in the way of you just being focused on what's happening. And there's a there's like a sensitivity to it where I'm far more sensitive to noticing when I'm getting caught in shit and then just realizing, oh, if I'm not focused on it, then that's the whole thing. Like me just being focused on is the entire thing of it right now. It's not this other thing, separate thing, bigger thing. It's it's within me and I'm focusing on it. It's like there's it's starting to feel more like a choice, whereas in the past it was less of a choice. It was kind of like it had its own pull, and now it's like, I don't know, getting it's like weaker to the point where I'm like, "Oh yeah, I could focus on that. Yeah, that's right there, but I don't have to, and I can just keep doing this and keep finding out and keep just being myself. Oh, I'm not sure what to do, what to say. Stop thinking about yourself, and it'll be right there." And that's what I keep kinda coming back to, and then it's right there.
It's just awareness of the habit. It's just awareness of the habit. The more you're aware that you're habitually reaching for thought for a sense of security, the more likely it is you're going to have a moment's hesitation before doing so. But we get so lost in the habit that becomes reflexive after a certain period of time. Again, this is my beef with the schooling system, right? They don't teach us any of this. They're just like, learn these facts. Fuck your development. Good luck. Like that says, hold up, right? But it's the ability. It's kind of like what you were saying there. It's like I feel like I'm working through things. It's like sort of what you're working through is really your need to focus on these things. That's what our triggers are, things that we just don't want to stop thinking about, things that we don't want to let go of, right? That's the process of healing from our trauma, is inevitably getting it to a point where we can just let it fucking go by changing our perception of it, right? By changing what we're learning from it, rather than it being something that shouldn't have happened to us. It's something that we can now take and turn into fire to forge the rest of our fucking life, right? And that's the process of healing. Well, what happens at that point? You don't keep thinking about it. You let it go, because that was the whole point, was to go through all of these thoughts that have gravity, that keep getting your attention over and over and over again, and to remind yourself, fuck, that's a habit. Fuck, that's a habit. Fuck, that's a habit. And then you have a choice, right? But that's what the entirety of it is how many thoughts are you getting stuck on? Because that's what's pulling you away from where you are. And we don't recognize that. Like, again, over the weekend, being surrounded by adolescents and teenagers, right? Like, you can see how every interaction that they go through is very I like it's kind of ham-fisted. Like, they don't know how to have conversations really at that point. There's not much nuance. Like, they're trying something, then they're like, maybe this make me likable, and then they're like, oh, why do I feel like shit? It's like, because you want it to be liked, like that kind of thing. And so all of that is just developing, but because it's just developing, all of those impacts are really raw. Really, really raw. And so you can see how all of a sudden they'll walk away from a conversation and they will just dwell upon that conversation, not recognizing that what they've just done is form a habit. And if they were to really focus on that conversation over and over and over again over days, it would become a signature memory for them that a lot of their personality would be based around. And then eventually, as they got older, they would have to work their way through the habit to recognize that it was because they dwelled upon that thing happening in a certain way and their perception of it and how they identified with it, eventually let it go, and then it would stop having an impact over them. It's like we're untying knots. Really, that's exactly what it is. We're untying knots and allowing ourselves to relax in an entirely different way.
Oh, I'm tying knots. That is good. That is good. That's what it feels like, and it's oh god damn, 'cause being around because what are they, like, 15, 16, 17? ish, around all around
Exactly.
that age.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, I'm thinking back to times, and it's funny because there's probably times that I don't even remember that were really impactful. Just a fleeting conversation that you keep in mind, that it hit in a way, or someone looked at you in a way, or they said something some way. Like they're all the insecurities I've had for a very long time, I'm sure they came from certain situations that I can't even necessarily remember. And as I've, you know, been willing to sit in stuff, it does feel like untying knots, but the untying, it's like there's almost it's like when a knot gets formed, you ever see like one of those big sailor knots, and they're weathered though. And then so when you untie it, it's like it's really clean underneath. And that's like you it's like the weathered part is almost you getting used to that feeling, but it's still in there, and it's deep in there, and you don't really know what it is. It's not really painful. It's just kind of like a dull pain. So then untying it, you're like, holy fuck, that's a lot of shit. Oh my God, what the fuck's going on? Am I losing all my progress? Have I forgotten anything? Is this gonna last forever? And then it gets untied, and you're like, oh, woo, holy shit, that feels quite good there. Oh, that was it. And it's like that discomfort is just like change and discomfort go hand in hand. So as that knot changes, it's like there's beautiful shit in there that's hidden from getting weathered over the years and being there for so long that you can't even see unless you're willing to untie it, right? And the untying is the change, is the discomfort. And that's the working back through. But, so many people, they just have a rope with a fuckload of knots on it, and they've just sank into that, and like, this is me. Like, that's the story of you. It's like the story of you is a bunch of knots over and over and over of impactful events that are, some are bigger, some are smaller. And then it's like you, and you're this big fucking rope with a bunch of knots all over it. And if you're really trying to maintain that idea, then it's gonna, you'll keep adding knots. But as you're willing to question it, it's like, yeah, you can recognize, oh, that rope and all the knots aren't me. And it's like, the knots are still there, bitch. They're still there. And you're gonna, if you're willing to continue to realize that you're never what you think, you're not what you think, it's like those knots will be allowed to be untied, but it doesn't mean that it's going to feel really good getting them untied. It's working back through it, but the untying is necessary in order to release it, because it's one thing to recognize it, it's another thing to actually go through the discomfort of the untying of the knot. And so yeah, I really appreciate that analogy. I clearly like that one a lot.
And the thing is, again, like, we've all worked through strings of Christmas lights. We understand that knots are often made up of other little knots, and then they're all knotted together. And so you got to work through the little knots to get to the bigger knots. And then once you got the big knots, some of the little knots come apart real easy, right? And that's the thing. Like, some of these things, we're like, okay, fuck, I learned that lesson going through that giant knot, and the next one's just like zip, zip, and they're gone, right? And it's just because you really took the lesson in on how to untie these knots. Maybe the point of untying these knots, why it feels so goddamn good when you do, right? Because that's really it. All we're doing is reinforcing a pattern of breaking down the shit that ruins our life. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're just entraining ourselves to just relax and just be. And in doing so, we're dealing with all of the habitual shit that is contrary to that, simply because we're going in a different direction. And I love the fact that that's really all repent means. Stop, turn around, go the other way. That's what repent means. It's like, stop, you're hurting yourself. If you go that way, it'll suck less. You can continue to hurt yourself by all means. That would be the path to hell, right? Or you can go to heaven and be with God as God, right? And it sounds all weird and religious until you realize all I'm really meaning is you can just relax and stop thinking about yourself and just be what you are. And what's incredible, and I'm going to share another story over the weekend because this was a good one. So, as I said, favorite sounds, forest and the ocean and the violin and so on and so forth. So at one point while they were practicing in another part of the camp, I decided to go down to the ocean's edge, just listen. And as I'm listening, I'm really, well, I'm really getting into the subjective experience of it, to the point where somebody that we know from Port Alberni just happened to be in the campsite. Our yoga instructor from our retreat in Port Alberni just happened to be in the campsite, and she's driving by on her bike with her daughter. She's like, "Ray?" And I just had this look of, who the fuck are you? Like, because I was just so immersed in the subjective experience of that moment. And what I mean by that is I wasn't thinking about myself. I was actually listening. I wasn't thinking about my body. I was just being. And in that state, you are quite literally just the universe, and it really does feel like you are in a state of just, it feels godly. And I know immediately religious people like, you feel like you're in control. No, that's a really superficial and kind of weird definition of God. I feel like the universe enjoying itself, perceiving itself, watching itself. And so after that interaction, and they went away, and it was a nice enough interaction, I decided to go for a bit of a stroll, still listening to the music, very much feeling the subjective experience. And as I'm walking down this trail, I see another smaller trail going to the left. I'm like, I'm going to take that one. I don't know where it goes yet, and it seems like the trail less trodden. And so I went that way, and I'm listening to the violin music coming through the woods, slowly walking, sauntering. Even I would even go so far as to say I was sauntering. It was a nice leisurely stroll, is what I was saying. I was feeling quite good about myself. I had the same stupid grin I have on my face right now, in fact. And all of a sudden, I hear a rustle, and I turn to my left, and about 2 or 3 feet beside me is a baby deer. And this baby deer is just munching on some leaves. And every once in a while, you would see it raise its head and listen to the violin music. And so I just stood there with this baby deer, listening to violin music in the forest, feeling very much at one with the universe, because I wasn't in any way thinking about it or even asking the question. There was no inner dialogue whatsoever. It felt like I was just the appropriate set of eyes for that moment, and ears, in fact. I actually have that on video, by the way, is that moment with the deer. I will show it to you when I see you at our October retreat. Speaking of which, I want to take a quick moment to mention that we have one ticket left for our retreat in October. This is the last mini retreat of the year, October 5th to October 9th. This place is dope. It has a pool table, it has a foosball table, and it has a ping pong table. The king bed is left. Patreon supporters get huge discounts. A tier 3 supporter saves $350 on the ticket. Tier 2 saves $150 on the ticket, and tier 1 saves $50 on the ticket. So if you can join us for this event, it's going to be the last mini retreat. After this, we are in the Netherlands on November 11th for a full 9-day dualistic unity retreat, which we have not had since April. This event is going to be intense. If you haven't come to a 9-day retreat previously, definitely try and join us in Vancouver, because this event is a wonderful warm-up. A number of people who have been to the retreat, I'm sure they're in the comment section right now, will tell you the mini retreats are well worthwhile. If you're not sure what this is all about, if you really just want to get a taste of what the retreats are, the mini retreats are fantastic. It really is a chance to experience community and family and all of that, because nobody's trying to experience shit. It's the whole point. Everybody's just being themselves. There's no expectations. And if there are, you're working on letting them go. That's the entire point of the retreat, is to see what it is. So if you have that adventurous spirit and you have not joined us yet, or if you have joined us and you would like to come back, we'd love to see you. Definitely buy that ticket now, because it's not going to last for long.
Fuck yeah. And I'm DMing a couple people on Instagram too. So if any of you are listening, there are a few people who are very close to buying, it seems like. So someone's going to get it and someone's going to be left with their thing in their hand. But no, it's going to be a blast. And I'm having just like a lot more fun in general with life, like realizing just how much weight I was carrying myself, that I was like holding on to myself, and seriousness and all of that. And the seriousness like I'm starting to just like be curious about that, because I'm starting to remember when I wasn't so serious about things. And like there's been plenty of times in my life, I'm not gonna lie, there's been plenty of times where I wasn't as serious, but, like, there's been, like, a more serious undertone, I feel like, since, I don't even know, like, halfway through high school, maybe? When I guess it was probably along the lines of or around the time when I started thinking about, like, going to a college and, like, going to a college, like, the best college I could, and, like, I didn't even have thoughts about what I wanted to do. I did think about wanting to do, like, finance or banking or whatever, just because I did enjoy the quantitative side of things for a while, but as soon as I started hearing about the just, like, how shitty those jobs were and just how like, even like, first couple years, you're kinda like just someone's bitch for 2 years. You just do their shit and, like, do very monotonous tasks and are working, like you don't do anything during the day, and then you get work at, like, 9 o'clock PM, and they're like, "Alright, get this done." It's, like, 7 hours of work, and it's just strange, and it's all just to get to a certain paycheck and, make a certain amount of money, and so, started to realize that isn't what I wanted, but it's been interesting, like, just not being as fucking serious all the time. It's been way more fun. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, I was the one holding myself back from this all the time. And when there's points where I'm being goofier, like less serious, and I almost catch myself wondering if I'm being judged, and then I'm like, oh, I don't give a fuck. And then I'm like, oh fuck, it was just me, like judging myself the whole time. When I thought something shouldn't happen or shouldn't be done in a certain way or any of it was just me telling myself that. Like even something like going to a bar and dancing, like there was a if I wasn't dancing, there was like an idea I maintained where I should be. And yet there is no shit. You can go to a bar and just hang out and talk also. It was like this constant feeling of I should be doing something other than what I'm doing. Like I'm doing the wrong thing at all times, no matter what. And it just like compresses onto you, right? And it's just like this weight, yeah, this suppression, always feeling like you should be doing something else. And it's been interesting realizing that all of the weight was just coming from my perception that there was a right thing to do. It's like, no, they're just fucking options, dude. Like they're all just options and you can they can be expressions of just where you're at, what you are, but it's never that you should be doing something else or there is a right way to express yourself. It's just whatever you're doing, you're doing. Shut up and keep doing. Like, you don't have to wonder about if this thing you don't have to think about yourself. It's like you can just be yourself. Like, you can just stop thinking about yourself and then act. And then just see what happens and not to do the correct thing, not to get to the right place, but just fulfilling in itself, being yourself, doing whatever you're doing and sharing yourself and being open like to the first first example you gave with just being able to be open about things and people kind of mask it by talking about someone else or talking about oh how kids are like this oh yeah interesting how kids they get caught up in judging himself and then getting it's like yeah it's like the more sensitive you are the more you realize people are always just talking about themselves when they're talking, which is so funny because I'm realizing with myself how many things I've said saying like, "Oh yeah, people think this, people think that." Blah blah blah. Meanwhile, I'm just like vomiting out my perception of myself as I go, and how often we're trying to hide those things, or even in judging people. It's like the judgments that you hold on to, you're the one thinking about them. Like they're coming from you. They're not coming from someone else. They're not like giving you those judgments to think. It's like they're coming from within you, how you see things. And so it's just been very fun and that last example is beautiful of just walking across a path that wasn't as downtrodden and then all of a sudden you stumble upon a baby deer that's just chilling there and it's like if that's not exploring a dream like I don't know what is and just the ability to fucking wander around exploring doing shit finding out is fucking exciting. Like, I'm starting to feel more and more like when I wake up in the morning that I'm not waking up to reality coming out of a dream, it's like, what's telling me there's a difference? It's just the wall of me, the perception of me. And without so much of that, it's like, I kind of get why Ray, when he walks around, kind of like bops around, like he's just kind of fluttering around, and someone comes across him and he's just like, oh, no, oh, what's up? It's just like a moment to moment sort of like, yeah, this is enjoyable to explore. And like, that's kind of the extent of it. Like, there's no fucking crazy deep cerebral sort of thing. It's just everything's uncertain. I don't know what's happening. I'm not going to assume as many things about what I think is happening to make myself feel more comfortable. Let's keep finding out. And I don't have to take this as seriously, or myself as seriously, as I once did, because there's no fucking benefit. It just ruins my own experience. Like, what's the fucking trade-off to that? I guess more certainty or comfort in feeling like things are staying the same despite them not being so. But it's a lot more fun to let go of that shit and just take things a little bit less seriously, especially yourself, a lot less seriously.
Oh yeah, no. Once you really get what I mean by keep it light, all of a sudden you're like, oh, oh, this is great. Like to be able to wake up in the morning and to feel like, oh, more potential, right? Because it's just like a dream will turn into a nightmare if you're afraid of it. Your life is very much the same, right? If you're afraid of what's going to happen next, if you're afraid of not being enough, if you're afraid in general, your life is going to be a daily grind. And it's just because you're trying desperately to figure out what the fuck's happening. How do I feel safe? How do I feel secure? How do I feel valuable? How do I feel like I fit in? How do I feel the way I think I should feel? And that's really it. And when you're doing that, it's a constant, never-ending game. It's like I was saying before, but you ever see those people where they have sticks that are all in a row, and then they put a plate on it and they spin that plate, and while the plate is spinning, they try and put another one on the other stick. And so eventually they'll have like a row of like 10 plates, and they're all spinning these sticks. Just one person just moving like a motherfucker, trying to keep these plates in the air, essentially, at the same time. And that's exactly what it feels like, except way worse when you're trying to control the universe, when you're trying to control your world, when you're trying to figure out what you should be doing, what's the right idea, what's the right thing to do, what would other people be doing, what are they perceiving me as? Oh my God, that's a lot of fucking plates. Oh my God. And you get so invested in it that you actually forget about anything else. And the alternative is let the plates hit the floor. Fuck it. Because you are never going to have control. And that's really what it is. It's not even about thoughts not having value. Thoughts have an incredible value until they're the total fucking truth to you. Then they're a trap. I've had so many thoughts in a day that will never, ever happen. But I learned from them. I learned as they went through. But it's funny because those thoughts were like, oh, that's nonsense. That's kind of a cool perspective, though. And it just goes by and we don't attach to it. But if it's a thought we're afraid of, then we attach to it. We don't just let it go by. We're like, oh, that might be the truth. Oh, shit, that might be the truth. It's not. It's never, ever, 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 ever the truth. Never, ever. It can't be. It can't be. Like, perfect example. This morning, I decided to get up at like 5:30 because, of course, it's my last day camping. And so I'm up before everybody else. I've got, one of my blankets around me. I go down to the water's edge, and the beach where I was, the tide gets so low that you can actually walk so far out into the ocean that you're basically where the seals are hanging out. Right. It was just incredible. And the sun's coming up, and it was just this picture perfect moment. Again, I had a lot of those this weekend. But it's funny because that moment, all that peace, somebody's be like, oh God, what a fantastic moment. I want that moment. It's like, yeah, you want the bills that I could decide to worry about. You want, the insecurities that I could decide to think about. You want all the backstory, because it's never the thought you think it is. It's never as simple as, oh, that's what it is. For how long? And to what depth? Right? It's never the superficial. It's like we want to take a picture of what a perfect moment is. It's like, that's a moment. It's like you're still thinking in that. You still have the capacity to doubt yourself. It's not the thing you're looking at. It's a whole fucking experience. So no thought is ever the truth. None of them. And if you can just recognize that, then they're a lot of fun to watch by. to watch go by, because they're not your master. They're not a threat to you. You're just like, huh, look at that fucker go by. And then you just let it go by and you've learned from it. And that's as important as it was, like a fart in the wind.
Like a fucking fart in the wind. Amen. And how often we can, if we want to focus on those things, like they're always there in potential for any experience, any situation. And like no matter what is going on, like they're right there. And it's so funny. Like over the last I don't know, 2 years or so, like how I kind of thought, I mean, there's definitely part of me. I don't think I actively thought about it that much, but like that there's a point where it's like it's just serene peace forever, and there's no fluctuations or ups and downs or whatever. And it's not like that at all. It's like you just get better at handling it. You just get better at dealing with it. You start to realize more and more that there isn't that same benefit that you thought there was about focusing on those things. Like there is a reality that's happening that has nothing to do with your perception of it. Like your perception of it is fucking irrelevant to how it's actually playing out. And you can have opinions about it, have perceptions of it, absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it's inevitably going to take away, like it's not being it. It's not being focused on it as you're focusing on those things. So even oh man, like realizing, and this stuck with me since, was like, there's no good or bad thoughts. It's like thought is the experience of hell. Like thought itself is the experience of hell. The focus on it, and the non like the thought that you can't escape it or get out of it, or it's going to last forever, or you're victim to it. Because so many of the strategies that I see for dealing with a negative perception of yourself is to build a positive perception of yourself. And it's still thinking about yourself a ton. Like, oh man, and the whole narrative of like, love yourself. You got to love yourself. Like, oh god, the amount of shit I see, and I don't ever really comment on it, but from people who, when and I'm starting to notice more and more people on social media, like very, very kind of full of themselves, like really, really love themselves, and people commenting like things like, you seem really full of yourself, and then other people commenting like they just love themselves. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself. Like self-love is important, but it's interesting how like self-love and self-hate are both states of psychosis that are focused on something that isn't real and taking away from heaven on earth sort of feeling of not thinking quite so much. So any time that you're spent self-absorbed, thinking something positive or negative about yourself, like you're going through it, you're being what is still, but it's an equal veil from reality. Like the reality that has nothing to do with your fucking opinion of it or perception of it or perception of yourself or things that are going on. And how often we use thinking to combat thinking, like the trap of focusing on ourselves. We just focus on ourselves differently and try and just shift that perspective or come up with a different perspective, but it's still entirely focused on ideas and opinions and perceptions that aren't the truth, that aren't real in the sense. Like your perception of yourself, positive or negative, any degree, isn't you. Like it isn't what you are ever, no matter what fucking story you come up with. And so it's just interesting how we combat one state of hell with another, just because it seems to, I don't know, make us feel good on the one side and yet have the same potential for consequence.
Isn't it funny? Oh my god. It's like the opposite to like thinking will get you somewhere is to just surrender, right? It's just to surrender. And it's like, well, what are you surrendering to? Well, it must be God. Why? Why must it be God? Why is that the first option that comes to mind? What? Like, you're just being yourself. It's just that in that state, all of a sudden you don't feel disconnected anymore. In that state, all of a sudden life does feel very different. Right. And at first you're like, oh my God, and it's awe-inspiring. It really is. Like I've spent many a time, many a moment awestruck just by reality being in front of me. It was like I had emerged from this fog of shit, and it was all just named Ray. You know, it's the fog of Ray, and that's what it was. And all of a sudden, you come out, and you're like, wow, everything's kind of bright, and people really don't seem like the dicks I thought they were. And why do I feel better? And it's just because all of a sudden you're not thinking about yourself. Is that God touching you? No, that sounds creepy. You know, it really is just you being you, you feeling free, you feeling like yourself. And that's not a state of peace. That is a state of peace with yourself. That is a state of peace with everything you are, from anger onward. Because you have to recognize that all of these parts of you serve a purpose. They are part of a giant goddamn tapestry, a moving goddamn jigsaw puzzle, if you want to look at it. And that's what you are, this constantly evolving thing with lots of moving parts. And if you just had some faith, allowed those parts to do what they're doing. In other words, allow yourself to feel what you're feeling without immediately assigning a story to that feeling, because you don't know. You don't know. You're like, I'm feeling anxious. It must be because I'm going into a situation I'm going to suck at. And then you start thinking about it. It's like, maybe you're not feeling anxious. Maybe, in fact, that feeling is just meant for you to just pay attention to it. Stop giving it a story. Stop saying, that's anxiety. Is it? Is it anxiety? Are you sure? Or are you just panicking about it? And if you gave yourself the space to just feel it, what would it do? It would bring you into your body. What do you have to do at that point? Just pay attention. But as soon as you start to panic and try to escape the anxiety, now you're caught up in a loop of control. Now you're trying desperately to make this thing go away just by convincing yourself it's no longer going to frighten you. And that's the funniest part about it, is that you've decided it's something to be frightened of, and now you have to do the work to convince yourself it's not, so you can get over your anxiety. When the entire time you didn't have to assume it was anxiety at all. You could have had faith in yourself and allowed the feeling to pass without panicking. It's just, how often have you panicked at the feeling previously? Because now that's the habit. That assumption of the feeling having a certain meaning is the habit. If you're aware of the habit, it starts to untangle. Yet another knot reveals itself. But it's the habit.
Oh man, like how quick feel something, and it's like a story is right there almost for the taking. And to your point, it's always like a habitual sort of story. And it's insane. I was thinking the other day about how, in general, there's like, you have a perception of yourself. I have a perception of myself. And I've talked about it where I was like, oh, for some people it falls on like they have a negative perception of yourself, or a positive perception of yourself. But that's a very fucking generalized point of view. It's not a positive or a negative. It's a specific perception of yourself that is cut off from all of the other potentials. It's like, if it's on a spectrum, it's not that it falls and it's like negative or positive. It's like there's all of these variable levers almost, and you've tweaked them to a very specific point. Like, this amount of this amount of that, not very good at this, not very good at that. But it's like a dot. It's not a whole big idea, and then someone else has a whole. It's like everyone sees you as a different fucking dot based on a combination of all of the levers. So it's not a positive or a negative or a type of point of view. It's a very specific point of view that you've gotten used to, and that keeps kind of with certain feelings. It's like whichever feeling the lever is closest to, it's like that's where it's like, oh, I have a go-to story for that feeling, or go-to fear for that feeling. And yet, like, it's just fucking crazy how different people can perceive you, right? Like how everyone can see you differently. Like, how is this blowing my mind so hard the last couple weeks that people see me differently than I see myself? Like, it sounds so fucking obvious as I'm saying it out loud, and I've probably said it a million times, but that there is actually another perspective. And so therefore, like, it almost starts to be silly, feel silly to go back and like continue to maintain my idea and keep running back to that. And it's like, oh, that's just one of those dots on that fucking like massive potential tapestry of how someone could see you, from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high to the everything in between and every different perspective. Like, it seems very silly for me to continue to go back to my habitual perception, thinking that that has any credence, any degree of truth whatsoever. But it's comfortable, habitual to go back to, especially when things start feeling really uncertain or really uncomfortable. It's like, I just want to know something. At least I know this. At least I know that. It's like, no, bitch, you don't know that either. You don't know that either. You don't know any of that shit. You don't actually, but that's okay. And then being willing to not keep looking at that, you start to get some practice in not running back to those patterns and being willing to, sit in the discomfort of the uncertainty and find out what you're capable of. And sure, you'll run back for certain things. It keeps coming up. It's right there, but you don't have to. And the more you're willing to be like, oh, I can just not keep running back to this thing, you start to find out what you're actually capable of without that big fucking weight. You like put the weight down. It's like, all right, find out. It's like, oh, I'm getting a little uncomfortable. Let me go pick this fucking weight back up so I know that I can be sure that this weight is here. Like, why the fuck would I do that? I guess it's familiar and comfortable and all that, and that's just it. But it's just that fucking minuscule, specific perspective that I'm maintaining of myself.
That's why it's always kind of made me laugh that one of the expressions I've heard throughout my life is, learn from your mistakes. And yet we continue to throw ourselves into thought like it's going to deliver on its promises, right? And it's just so funny because basically what's happened is over time, a number of people have went, well, that doesn't work though. And they've tried to describe it in a number of different ways in the best way that they could. But it's never really been a dominant part of the conversation because we were too busy fucking empire building, right? We were too busy feeling like masters of the universe and carving a religion that says, you'll have dominion over the world, that kind of thing. And so we got really caught up in this giant promise of progress and mastery and being, in control. And what's interesting is now individually in my life, I just recognize that's not the case. Like, it's not worth fighting about. It's not worth getting upset about. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Fuck it. And I'm like, go. But what's interesting is that's changed my dialogue. It's changed what I see in the world. It's changed how I perceive myself and everything else. And so it changes everything I say. And all I'm doing is talking to other people going, oh, you're still running around on that, eh? Yeah. So I don't know if you recognize this, but have you run around that for a long time? Yeah, it doesn't end. You're going to keep doing that shit. And it's going to be exhausting. You go ahead. Don't worry. Like, it's fine. It's fine. You got to do something with your time. Like, no problem. But when you're done, I'll be over here and we can compare notes. But I'm telling you, that fucking game is rigged, right? And that's really all it is just the recognition that thing that's causing shit and suffering and fucking misery in your life. Yeah, give it up. Just let it go. Let it do its thing. You don't have to worry about it. It's an option. It does not demand your attention, despite quite clearly saying, give me your attention. The fact is, it's optional. And that's really all that's happening, is that I've become disillusioned with this shit. Other people are becoming disillusioned with this shit. And we're all just having a giant ongoing conversation about how fucking pointless this is. And that's really all it is. And we're doing so because we're enthusiastic, because we're all feeling better. And that's what drives it. That's what drives it, is the fact that the proof is in the pudding, right? That's really what it is. So we have to wrap up here, but we are going to have a tier 2 call and then a tier 3 call directly after that. If you would like to join us on Patreon, we do groups 5 days a week. So you can join us on the screen. You can ask us a question. You can get to know the community. We also have a community Discord, which you can check out as well. You don't have to be a Patreon member for that. That shit's entirely free. You can check out the link on our website. Just go to dualisticunity.com and click on community. It'll take you to the Discord. But if you can join us on Patreon, that is very much the best part of Dualistic Unity. These groups, the community that's formed in there, and the reason that I say that is because Patreon is totally private. Nothing that we talk about on Patreon will ever see the light of day in terms of being a public video. So you can feel comfortable and safe just expressing yourself and asking questions. Outside of the retreats, it really is, the best thing that we can do in providing just a space for you to feel like you have space. So if you can join us on Patreon, we'd love to see you. If you can't join us on Patreon, that's just fine. Definitely join us at a retreat, though, because that is where you can actually feel like you have the space to apply everything that you've already been learning. You just get caught up trying to exist in the world. Give yourself the space. Join us at a retreat. We'd love to see you. Andrew, this has been a blast, man.
It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed the games rigged, games broken sort of thing. For some reason, the Vermont house was coming up, and it's as if like the pool table had a slant to it, but like a pretty significant slant to where people would set up, and it just like kept sliding, and you're over like playing pinball. And people are like, why won't it work? And people just keep going back to it. And they're like, it's going to work one of these times. They're like, no, there's a slant. Like the table's busted up. Like there's no way you're going to be able to use that. And people just keep going back to it, going back to it, going back to it. One of these times it's going to work. I just gotta. And then it's like people are putting up on the sides of the legs shit to like prop it up. And it's still not quite slanted. It's never really perfect. And it just keeps focusing on that because I got to play this game. I decided I wanted to play pool. I decided I wanted to be something, to become something more. I've decided that, and I'm going to keep trying to do it until I can. And game's rigged. It's a broken fucking game. It's a broken game, and you don't have to play it. You don't have to keep trying to become something. Just be yourself and keep being that for the rest of your life. And that's enough. And that's all we're over. We're over playing pinball and skee ball and Pac-Man. And there's other options. It's not the only one. But this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to chatting with everyone on Patreon in about 10 minutes here.
Hell yeah. Just another thought. Just, while we're playing this rigged game, it makes a lot of sense that we collectively create more rigged games like our government and our economy. See you soon.